All right, our first guest speaker is Dave Walrath. Dave has been a legislative advocate for CalRTA for 25 years. He is a paid worker. Dave's expertise is getting things done, and getting things done in a period of time that they can be done. He doesn't shoot out there for a way out in the future. He looks at the things that are coming up close and what he can do. He works on the state and national level representing retired teachers. And I've heard Dave speak many times, and I'm looking forward to hear what he has to say tonight. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. If I croak at you a little bit, it's I'm getting over a cold, but I'm not contagious. That's why I told Ed in the car. I'm a lobbyist, so you know I have to be telling the truth. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you. I was asked to talk about politics and pensions. And I'll be touching on it in 3 different ways. The first is, why in the heck do you care about politics and pensions? The second is, what happened last year on the politics of pension change? I do not use the word reform. It was a change. There are parts of it that were reformed, there are parts of it that were not. Then who played what part of that process? And then the last is, where do we go from here? I could talk about politics, Ed can't. Ed's a civil servant. He'd have Hatch Act problems. I don't have any of those problems. So let me start with, why do you care? You care because the legislature and the governor can change how pensions are funded and the types of benefits that are not vested. They can reduce or amend non-vested benefits. They can create new benefits. And some have been urging them to repeal vested benefits and go to court and see what happens. That's why politics matters, because politics is on multi-levels. Politics of initiatives, because there have been initiatives submitted to the Attorney General with the idea of changing the system to a 401k. Not simply for new members, taking it for current members, and saying any benefits earned subsequent to X date, the last one was a January 1, 2013 date, would be under a 401. There have been local initiatives on the same basis. San Jose, San Diego, what was going on in Costa Mesa. Politics matter because you're public servants, you're public employees, paid with public funds, and anything dealing with public funds is dealing with politics. And that's the very nature of the process. I love the process. See that quote? We can't be creative if we refuse to be confused. I think I'm the most creative person in this room. Politics is also the world of confusion. 38 new members of the State Assembly. And if current Assembly members are elected to the 2 state Senate vacancies and the 1 probable vacancy in the Assembly, or potentially 3 state Senate vacancies and 1 in the Assembly, if all of those people are current Assembly members and new members come in, we'll be up to 42 members of the Assembly having a grand total of maybe 2 months of experience. There are only 80 members in the Assembly. You're over half. The dynamics of the House change radically when half the members, or close to half the members, are brand new and learning how the House works and how they work together. And it's at this time when the process becomes very, very important. And I'll touch on that in the last piece on where do we go from here. But why do politics matter? So what happened last year? Last year was the culmination of approximately 3 years of pension issues, most of which were driven by media, Governor Schwarzenegger, and outside interest groups. The media was driving Because let's face it, pension spiking and revolving door, even though it may have very, very few people involved, is a wonderful article. There were not that many fire chiefs who retired at $250,000 a year, then walked across the street and started up again. But it only takes one. The media loves it. It's 24/7 news cycle. It goes forward, and the presumption then is, well, this is happening all over. In the process of time, from the proposals on various changes through the initiative process where the people did not have the votes, did not have the money to do their initiative, we ended up with last year, which was a year of pension change. So who were the players? There are organizations who do not believe that public employees should be unionized. They do not believe they should have collective bargaining rights and should not be having public funds for retirement benefits. The basic point of view is the only thing an employer should have to pay for an employee is the salary of the day. Pension is a deferred compensation. They believe deferred compensation is not an employer obligation. It's an employee obligation to save their compensation to provide for their benefit. Otherwise, there could be a liability on taxpayers. Many of these are very, very wealthy people who probably don't pay taxes in the first place. But nonetheless, they have this great concern about taxpayers. So you have those organizations which inherently do not like the idea of organized public employees. We have anti-tax groups. The belief that if you're paying defined benefit pensions, there's a taxpayer liability. The whole idea is, if that's the case, we're going to pay more tax. There's nothing in CalSTRS or CalPERS that automatically triggers a tax increase. It's a question of how you allocate existing tax revenues. How do you deal with compensation between current compensation and future compensation? But from an anti-tax group point of view, that doesn't matter. So they don't like the idea of defined benefit pensions. Governor Brown. Governor Brown supported cutting benefits for new employees and restricting downstream liability for the state. Pains me a little bit to say that, but that's the reality. And then the media. My friends in the media. They do a very, very good job of press releases. They would probably fail any basic test of public pensions. What the benefits are, what the average benefits are, how do you accrue benefits, how do you pay for benefits, what are the transfer of obligations, what are the intergenerational issues. They would probably fail. But they can write one heck of an article on a revolving door. They can write one heck of an article on the one person who may have spiked their pension in this area. The media is not into the education process. They're into the informing process. And informing and education are not exactly the same thing. So you had media. All of these were coming together, talking about pension cuts in various ways. The governor recognized that legally you cannot cut vested benefits for current employees. So his whole proposal, his 12-point proposal, which dealt with a whole variety of things, were primarily involved with future employees. The parts that were affecting current employees were dealing with things like spiking and like that. Ed will get into that when he does his presentation. I'm not going to go into the 12 points or the various points that were eventually in Assembly Bill 340. Ed will touch on that. Mine is the politics. So who wanted change that was reform but not benefit cuts? And the people who were there were the public employee unions, people like CalRTA, not unions, but very, very interested and concerned about the pension system and the health of the pension system and the security and adequacy of pensions. So We wanted to correct pension spiking too. We believe that was very, very important, and there were ways which CalSTRS has done a great job, but there were still other tools they needed. So yes, pension spike. The revolving door. You shouldn't be able to retire one day, draw your retirement benefit, and then take the same job in the same place the next day. Receive your retirement benefit and the salary. Revolving door. If you're going to retire, retire. Doesn't mean you can't come back, because people are connected to what they do. They like to work. It's not as if anybody really wants to say, I do this today, I love it, I'm retiring, and I'll never ever become involved with that again. People want to come back. School districts need people to come back. But that's different than retire, come back the next day, same job, same position, same pay, plus your retirement. Different animal. And from our point of view as CalRTA and from the stakeholder groups, the people who are involved with CalSTRS, our biggest issue was the unfunded obligation and long-term funding adequacy for CalSTRS. We wanted that addressed as part of the pension debate. It turned out that we could not get there because neither the legislature nor the governor wanted to address that issue as part of the pension change legislation. They didn't want to do that because their highest priority was Proposition 30. Passing the governor's tax initiative, because unless that happened, we were going to see massive cuts to public education and no end in sight. So their focus on priority was get the revenues necessary to balance the state budget. Then once that occurs, we can look at how to deal with these other issues. But if in looking at those other issues, we cannot balance the budget, that doesn't help any of us down the road. So theirs was defer the discussion. On the legislature side, I'm not sure where the administration is. They have recognized the CalSTRS unfunded obligation, but they did not make a proposal in this budget. So we'll find that out as we go forward. The initiative process was proposed and died mainly because the governor undercut it. And they couldn't find money because the governor undercut it. When the governor came out with his 12-point plan, he basically killed the more radical proposals, which was helpful because it had been very, very difficult to fight a pension cut initiative on the ballot, Proposition 32, and Proposition 30 passage all at the same time. So the governor's action took away the money interest from outside entities to do a pension reform initiative. Instead, everybody got on board of waiting to see what the legislature and governor would do. Also, their polling, notwithstanding all their numbers saying, yes, everybody's with us. Actually, when you really went into their polling, it didn't look that good. So it's hard to generate a lot of money when your polling says your initiative is going to fail. So we ended up, Pension Conference Committee, conference committees, 3 from the Senate, 3 from the Assembly, 2 from the majority party on both sides, 1 from the minority party. They started their work in January, February, March. When was the first hearing down south?
Actually, it was the year before that.
Year before that. Yeah. Oh, did we have fun? Started their process to develop a pension overhaul through the legislative process. The governor and some talked about a constitutional amendment. That truly was a deal breaker for both the legislature and the interest groups. CalRTA, CTA, CFT, AXA, You know, we can go through the whole laundry list. All of us were in the same position. Not a constitutional amendment, because the only way you can change a constitutional amendment is another constitutional amendment. The legislature, nor did we, believe that we knew enough about all the ramifications of any change we made that it would be absolutely perfect and we could put it in the Constitution. It's better to put it in statute, and then in 5 or 10 years, if we discover that somehow we made a mistake. Let me circle back a little bit. There are about 3,000 bills introduced, most of them correcting other bills that have been passed. We never get it right. We always get better information later. We discover the unintended consequences of our action. Unintended consequences from a constitutional amendment are locked in stone for a while. Unintended consequences in statute you can deal with in statute. We did not want a constitutional amendment, the legislature did not want a constitutional amendment, and the governor in the end did not insist on a constitutional amendment. Ed will go into all the different provisions that were in the bill, but the politics were aligned to make change, make real change, cut pensions for new employees, and look where we're going forward, but do it by statute. Politics aligned. What was the other piece? It was a reapportionment election year under a whole series of reforms. Top 2 primary. Citizen Commission on Reapportionment. The legislature, let's put it this way, they were concerned on what the outcome would be. They also knew that the citizens wanted to have pension change. So if you're running in a brand new district and you're not sure who your opponent's going to be, do you want to try to address an issue that's coming before you from the citizens, from the media? And so politically, for many of the people who are there, if they had not addressed a comprehensive change, they might not have been here now. Also from the 2 political parties side, the state Senate did think they had a shot at 2/3. The Assembly thought they had no hope for 2/3 in the reapportioned districts. As it turns out, in the state Senate, better than 2/3, state Assembly better than 2/3. But both sides were looking at that possibility and were concerned that if there were not pension reform or change occurring prior to the elections, they would not be able to reach that goal. And that is truly a political goal that the party, majority party and leadership felt they had to have. That way they would not have to negotiate with the minority party for the next 2 years. And in fact, given the outcome, it's highly possible that for the rest of this decade, the state Senate will be at or very, very close to a 2/3 majority as Democrats. State Assembly is probably going to roll back and forth, but very, very close. Which means the majority party will be both responsible to the electorate, because you can't blame the Republicans. Well, you can, but it may not sell as well. I mean, if you got 2/3 in each house, it's really hard to say people can't do anything are the ones who are at fault. Responsible, but have the ability to do the imprint. And getting to 2/3, just as Proposition 30 was vitally important to them, just as defeating Proposition 32 was vitally important to them, getting to 2/3 was vitally important to them. All of which said, pension change. So they did that. Like I said, Ed will go on. But what's the other piece? You have to educate people. almost every member of the legislature, at least 80%, come out of public employees, out of city council or some other part of government that is part of CalSTRS. If you read the media articles, there were very few on CalSTRS, a lot on CalSTRS. So to educate on CalSTRS being different than CalSTRS was something we were all doing over the last 2 years. The problem with that, as it turns out at the end, was that if you want consistency, you will probably not have equity. Because addressing a CalSTRS issue in a particular way, that resolution is not necessarily the correct resolution for CalSTRS. So that was an issue on both earnings limitation, on what happens on benefits for new employees, and a couple of other ways. Which is why we wanted statute. Because we're concerned that some of the actions that were taken will make it more difficult to ensure that there's a highly qualified teacher in each classroom. We won't know for 3 to 5 years, but we have that concern. So what was the final outcome? I'm not going to go into the provisions, but the final outcome is fairly simple. Highly compensated people will always be able to take care of themselves. So they're fine. CalSTRS with Social Security and the combination has a better retirement at almost every income level than CalSTRS. However, CalSTRS took a bigger cut